Apparently, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is not satisfied.
The growth numbers have come in higher than many expected, but I'm still not satisfied with the level of growth that our economy is achieving.
Neither are we. A BBC News investigation, even there turning against Labour, revealed that concerns were raised about Rachel's expenses when she was working at HBOS between 2006 and 2009. It was a detailed 6-page complaint from a whistleblower with dozens of pages of supporting evidence documents, including emails, receipts and memos, which accused Rachel and 2 other managers, one of them her boss, of using the bank's money to fund a lifestyle of events, taxis and gifts for each other. The BBC claimed to have seen these documents and spoken to more than 20 people. Some of them were her former colleagues. From a dodgy CV to a suspended parliamentary credit card and now some questionable expenses that the Labour Party are trying to shove under the rug. It's not a case of whether Rachel goes, it's a case of when. I'll give her 3 months. By that time, we'll have another set of economic growth figures, which I believe will be the final nail in Rachel's coffin. Every time these lot come up with something, they always come up with the fixing the foundations baloney.
Change our plan, not changing the conversation. Change and reform are coming. Fixing the foundations.
That's why we are fixing the foundations to better support our public finances.
We're going to take those hard choices because it's vital we fix the foundations and build that brighter future that he described in his visionary speech.
At my first budget in October, it was my duty as Chancellor to fix the foundations of our economy.
Fix the foundation, fix the foundation, fix the foundation. I'll fix them all into the flaming foundation. Seriously, from Rachel Reeves to Sir Keir Starmer, David Lammy, Ed Miliband, Angela Rayner, Yvette Cooper, Bridget Phillipson and the Tory party as well. It'll be a long time before the British public forgive them for landing us into the quagmire. It's like a ruminating nightmare. Our politicians have failed us. Well, joining me now is the former editor of the Labour list, Peter Edwards. Peter Edwards, are you not sick of hearing your people, as in the Labour Party, go on about fixing the foundations?
Well, all political parties have slogans, and the old adage is it's only when the people saying them are so sick and tired of them that they're bored that the public start to take notice. And let me give you one example. In the general election, you know, people who are in the Westminster bubble in the media, you know, and I'm guilty of that, made a joke about how often we heard Keir Starmer's father was a toolmaker, but fewer than a third of the public were aware of what his father did for a living. So although it seemed like it was repeated endlessly, it hadn't cut through.
Tools.
Toolmaker.
The irony. Look, Rachel Reeves, seriously, first of all, the inconsistencies in her so-called online CV, so that would be on her LinkedIn profile, which changed 3 times. Then we've had other things where we know that her parliamentary credit card was suspended after £4,000 of undocumented or expenses were seen on it, so she had it suspended. And now here we go again with another instance where we are hearing that people have said that she, although this was, I think, some sort of work initiative, there's been a lot of money that's spent in expenses that didn't seem correct.
So the important thing in all of this has been no finding of wrongdoing. And I'm a former newspaper reporter, and it's completely legitimate that reporters try and find out information about public figures, but there's been no finding of wrongdoing. And I thought you mustn't lose sight of that.
Well, the fact that there was quite a detailed report on it, though, does suggest that there was some sort of suspicion.
So referring to the expenses at HBOS?
Right, yeah. So that's not good, is it?
But it wasn't a report. It was a whistleblowing claim. So that's different to an official or an independent report. And the whistleblowers, of course, have legal protections in every workplace, but the whistleblowing report was what was not verified. And all the media have said, based on the comments of HBOS sources and I think Labour sources, that the process wasn't completed. There was no disciplinary process against Rachel Reeves that even began, let alone one that was concluded against her. So it does come back to the point, yes, it's a job of reporters to find out embarrassing things about public figures, but there's been no finding of wrongdoing. And I think that's vital because obviously all jobs in government require probity, but particularly when you're Chancellor.
Well, that's quite true, but the CV situation was another one where she said that she was a decade at the Bank of England, which wasn't true at all. I mean, she doubled the time, and actually in the 5 years that she was there, 1 year she was actually training. So do you think that she's qualified enough to be the Chancellor of the Exchequer? Do you think that she's got the right credentials, really?
Yes, I mean, I do, because I think she trained as an economist and she worked in a bank. And actually, you know, I don't see how that would bar from anyone. If you think about the way politics works, you know, you win or lose based on your arguments as well as your CV. You know, I think George Osborne may have studied history, Boris Johnson was a magazine editor, and so on and so on. There's no qualification to be Prime Minister per se. And let me give you one example. Ben Wallace, who was seen as a very effective Defence Secretary under the Tories, was a former soldier, a veteran, and was a good Defence Secretary. But that's actually been relatively rare. Nearly all of the Defence Secretaries in the last 30 years have not been ex-military personnel.
We would forgive Rachel if she didn't have the so-called work experience, and I don't think she has, frankly, to be the Chancellor if the economy was going gangbusters. But let's be honest, many of the policies that she's put forward, including the tax on workers, because even though she says it's on employers, it isn't really. She herself has said it's a job tax, and raising it on either is still a tax on employees, even though she's only attacking the employers of public companies, which again is madness. But do you think that she has the credentials, seriously? Because she's not doing well, is she? Would you say that she's doing a good job as Chancellor so far?
I'm not going to repeat the phrase about foundations, but I think they've started to put in place some of the things that will bear fruit. I completely accept that I support the Labour government. They'll be judged on economic growth and on cost of living pressures, which have been elevated for well over a decade now, since about 2007. So Labour will be judged on economic growth. That's fair enough. But whether it's quote-unquote fixing the foundations or putting the building blocks in place, things like settling some of the strikes, starting to get the NHS moving again, setting up Great British Energy, these are, if you like, not necessarily sexy or exciting things, but they're all about trying to make economic growth a bit easier to happen.
You say settling the strikes, but they settled the strikes simply by settling them. There was no real negotiation in terms of some sort of concession from a lot of the unions that they closed these talks down with, and we could have got a lot more. So it feels to me like they're just literally handing money out without any real comeback. That doesn't really work for the British people, because we're the taxpayers, we're the ones that are going to have to pay for the pay rises.
Well, we're all focused on GDP, quite rightly, but every day the trains are not running is a further multi-billion-pound hit. So these things are not just judged in isolation of, is this a fair claim? I actually think they were. I think it's quite tough being a train driver. I'm not sure I could do it. But secondly, the cost in time as well of trains.
You'd be good at it.
Of trains. Well, you haven't seen me struggling with a map and having cold sweats in the car.
You'd be good at it because there's a track and it just takes you where you've got to go.
But there is a cost as well to trains not running. And a prolonged dispute.
Yes, but there's also a cost to things not running efficiently. So there are certain savings that they could have made in terms of AI, or changing some of the company practices, or reducing staff where not needed, or doing those things that a private company would do so they can maximise profits or spend less. And none of that kind of...
Well, they are private companies, though, Nana.
But as a whole, though, well, they are, but they're not really, because they're answerable to the government in that respect.
But they're not owned by you or I as a taxpayer.
But we still pay for those pay rises, right? So that money for the pay rises comes out of the public purse. So that's where I draw the line. So if the money's coming out of the public purse for those pay rises, then there should be some negotiation as to some form of efficiency that will mean that we don't need to spend so much, and there wasn't. And that, I feel, was the problem with her negotiation.
Well, when we got to be clear, we generally don't have nationalised railways in Britain, although that's in a process of changing as franchises are allowed to run off. But I think you and I don't always agree, but I think we could agree that the railway system is not working properly. We've got this weird hybrid system where they're run by private companies for shareholder benefit, so capitalism. But you and I, the taxpayers, are giving subsidies. And obviously, like anything in life, if we're paying for it, then it'd be nice to have control and ownership of it as well.
Well, I will agree there. Fine. Wow.
A happy moment.
This is a happy moment between Peter Edwards and myself. Wonderful. Peter Edwards is the editor of Labour List.